On my honeymoon, my husband smiled and said, "This marriage was just a way to secure my family's business deal." He thought I'd cry and accept it, but instead, I slid a document across the table that wiped the smirk off his face because I should have been heartbroken, devastated. A new bride sitting across from the man I had just married, on what was supposed to be the most magical trip of my life. But as I stared at the flickering candle between us, listening to Adrian speak, all I felt was a cold, calculated satisfaction. His voice was laced with amusement, as if he were delivering a well-rehearsed monologue. "This marriage," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "was never about love." He leaned back in his chair, watching me, waiting for my reaction. "It was a way to secure my family's business deal. And now that it's done, you can stop pretending this is something more than what it really is." Before we begin, I want to thank each of you for being part of this journey. If you love stories of power, strategy, and revenge served cold, make sure to subscribe. It's free and ensures you never miss a moment of the game. Now, let's dive into the ultimate tale of betrayal and triumph. I lifted my gaze to meet his, and for a moment the world around us, the soft ocean breeze, the distant hum of the waves, the golden candlelight, seemed to blur into irrelevance. He expected tears, a broken heart, a stunned silence. But he had no idea who he had married. Instead of an emotional outburst, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single document. With careful precision, I slid it across the polished surface of the table. The smirk that had curled at the edges of his lips moments ago faltered. "What's this?" he asked, his confidence shifting ever so slightly. I crossed my arms, allowing a slow, deliberate smile to form. "Go ahead. Read it." His fingers closed around the paper, unfolding it with an air of nonchalance. But as his eyes moved over the words, the color drained from his face. The confident businessman, the man who had meticulously planned his deception, suddenly looked like a chess player who had realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered. "You?" His voice was quieter now, laced with disbelief. "What is this?" I took a slow sip of my wine before setting the glass down with an almost lazy elegance. "That, my dear husband, is a clause I had added to the prenuptial agreement. One you conveniently overlooked." I tapped a manicured finger against the table. "You see, while you were busy ensuring that this marriage would benefit you, I was making sure it would destroy you the moment you tried to play me." Adrian's grip tightened around the paper. His jaw tensed. This isn't possible." "Oh, but it is." I tilted my head slightly, feigning curiosity. "Didn't your team read the fine print? It states that in the event of proven deceit, such as a marriage orchestrated under false pretenses, the deceiving party forfeits all assets gained from the union." I let the words sink in before adding, "which in this case includes your family's newly acquired shares, now belonging to me." The candlelight flickered between us, casting shadows across his expression, one that was rapidly shifting from composed arrogance to barely contained panic. "You can't do this." His voice was sharp now, the edge of control slipping. I laughed softly, the sound a stark contrast to the tension crackling in the air. "Oh, Adrian. I already have." He shot up from his chair, nearly knocking over his glass. "You think you can just take everything from me?" I remained seated, composed. "Not take. Reclaim." I leaned forward slightly. "Because unlike you, I never needed your wealth. I had my own. But you needed this marriage to keep your family's business afloat. Without my family's assets, your empire was already crumbling." I gestured toward the document still clenched in his fist. "And now with this, well, let's just say your father won't be very pleased." Adrian's nostrils flared as he stared at me, the weight of his miscalculation sinking in. I gave him a moment, letting him process the magnitude of his downfall. Then with a casual flick of my wrist, I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. "You might also want to check the news," I said, my voice laced with amusement. He hesitated before pulling out his own phone, his fingers moving in haste. As the articles loaded, I watched his expression morph from confusion to dread. "Adrian Sterling's family empire faces unexpected shakeup. Newlywed wife now majority shareholder," the headline read. Below it, detailed reports of the power shift, along with well-placed leaks of internal corruption, spread across every major business news outlet. His gaze snapped up, fury and disbelief clashing in his eyes. "You leaked this?" I shrugged, feigning innocence. "Did I?" His fists clenched at his sides, But for the first time, Adrian Sterling, the man who thought he had orchestrated the perfect deception, was utterly powerless. Silence stretched between us, thick and unyielding. Then finally I rose from my chair, smoothing the fabric of my dress as I did. "You underestimated me," I said, my voice softer now, almost pitying. "You thought I was just another pawn in your game." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "But the thing about playing games, Adrian, is that you should never assume you're the only one who knows the rules." His jaw tightened, his mind undoubtedly scrambling for a way out. But there was none. I turned, my heels clicking against the stone floor as I made my way toward the villa's entrance. Before stepping inside, I glanced back one last time. "Enjoy the rest of our honeymoon," I said smoothly, amusement lacing my tone. "I'm sure you'll find it enlightening." And with that I walked away, leaving him standing there, the weight of his downfall pressing down on him like an ocean tide he could no longer control. I stepped through the glass doors of our villa, leaving Adrian standing alone on the terrace, clutching the damning document like a lifeline slipping through his fingers. The moment I disappeared inside, I let out a slow breath, my pulse steady despite the firestorm I had just ignited. The night air had carried the scent of salt and citrus, but all I could smell now was the intoxicating aroma of victory. I moved across the elegantly furnished room with the ease of someone who belonged here. And in a way I did. I had made sure of it. The villa, the wealth, the influence, it was all mine now. Adrian had built a kingdom on deception, and in one move, I had claimed it from beneath his feet. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Behind me, I heard the sound of the terrace door sliding open, the quick, heavy footfalls of a man desperately trying to regain control. "You think this is over?" His voice was taut, threaded with an edge he had never directed at me before. I turned slowly, meeting his glare with a composed smile. "No, Adrian. This is just the beginning." He exhaled sharply, his hands tightening into fists before he forced himself to unclench them. "You don't understand what you've done." I arched a brow. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You gambled and you lost." His jaw tensed, and for the first time since our wedding I saw it, the crack in his perfectly curated mask. The man who had orchestrated every move, who had dictated every step of our relationship, was finally realizing he had been outplayed. I walked to the grand mahogany desk at the center of the room, the one that overlooked the ocean beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. From a slim leather folder I pulled out another document and turned to face him. "This," I said, tapping the paper, "is the official transfer of controlling interest. Effective immediately." Adrian's breath hitched, his gaze darting between me and the document. "You can't be serious." "I warned you," I said, my voice smooth, unhurried. "You should have read the fine print." His fingers raked through his hair as he took a step back, eyes clouded with something dangerously close to panic. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered almost to himself. I tilted my head. "That's where you're wrong." I knew exactly what I was doing the moment I said I do. For a moment, silence settled between us, thick with unsaid words. Then Adrian straightened, his expression shifting. The panic receded, replaced by something else. Something colder, more calculating. "You think you've won," he said, his voice measured now, his control reasserting itself. "But this isn't checkmate, sweetheart. This is just another round." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "Still underestimating me? How predictable." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Do you really think I didn't plan for this? That I didn't anticipate your next move?" His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I reached for my phone, tapping the screen with slow precision. "Your family's legal team is going to have a very interesting morning." I turned the screen toward him, showing him the email I had scheduled to send in exactly 10 minutes. "All of your family's financial dealings, every hidden offshore account, every shady business arrangement, it's all documented here. And if you try to retaliate, this email reaches every major news outlet by sunrise." Adrian's face drained of color. He lunged for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly, shaking my head. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." His chest rose and fell in quick succession, fury warring with disbelief. "You set me up," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No," I corrected, "I gave you a choice. You could have told me the truth. You could have walked away before the wedding, before dragging me into your little business scheme. But you didn't." I slid the phone back into my pocket. "And now you'll live with the consequences." Adrian stared at me for a long moment, his fists clenching at his sides. The air between us felt electric, charged with the weight of everything unspoken. I had shattered his carefully crafted illusion, and in its place, I had built something far stronger. Then, just as quickly as the tension had reached its peak, Adrian exhaled a slow breath and forced a smirk. "You're good," he admitted, tilting his head. "I'll give you that." I crossed my arms. "I'm better than good. I'm the one in control now." He let out a short, humorless chuckle, shaking his head as he looked out at the ocean. For a moment he almost seemed impressed. Almost. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. I watched him go, my pulse steady, my mind clear. He thought this was just another move in the game. But he didn't realize, there was no game left to play. The moment the door closed behind him, I turned back to the desk, my fingers tracing the edges of the documents that had sealed his fate. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it wasn't over yet. I remained standing at the mahogany desk, my fingertips gliding across the thick paper that had single-handedly unraveled Adrian's grand scheme. The villa was silent now, save for the soft rustling of the waves outside. The tension that had once filled the air had dissipated, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Adrian wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He was a strategist, and if there was one thing men like him hated, it was being outmaneuvered by the very person they underestimated. I turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the moonlight cast a silver glow on the water. My phone vibrated in my pocket, snapping me from my thoughts. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number. "You think this is over? You'll regret what you've done." I smirked, shaking my head. Of course he couldn't resist. Adrian had spent his life winning, manipulating, ensuring that everything bent to his will. The idea that someone, especially his own wife, had taken the game out of his hands must have been driving him mad. I typed back a simple reply. "No, Adrian. You'll regret underestimating me." I set the phone down, knowing he wouldn't respond. He needed time to process what had happened, to regroup, to formulate whatever counterplay he thought he had left. But it didn't matter. I had already anticipated his next move. A knock at the door disrupted my thoughts. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. Too late for hotel staff. I made my way to the door, my heartbeat steady, my instincts alert. When I pulled it open, I wasn't surprised to see the man standing there. Lucas Sterling. Adrian's older brother. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his dark eyes held the same intensity as Adrian's but without the arrogance. He studied me for a moment before stepping inside without an invitation, his movements precise and deliberate. I closed the door behind him, arms crossed. "Let me guess. You're here to clean up your brother's mess." Lucas turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "You knew exactly what you were getting into when you married Adrian," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "You played the game well, but don't think for a second that this is over." I leaned against the desk, meeting his gaze with unwavering confidence. "You mean Adrian isn't the only one in your family who makes deals in bad faith?" Lucas's lips quirked in a humorless smile. "You made a mistake," he said, stepping closer. "You think taking those shares makes you untouchable, but all you've done is make yourself a target." I shrugged. "I've been a target since the moment Adrian decided to use me for leverage." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You could have handled this differently. A quiet settlement, a negotiation. But you had to go for the spectacle." I tilted my head. Adrian made it a spectacle the moment he chose deception over honesty. Lucas studied me for a long moment before slipping a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placing it on the desk between us. "This is your way out," he said. I unfolded the document, scanning the terms. It was a buyout offer. Generous but not nearly enough. They wanted me to walk away, to relinquish control of the shares, to quietly disappear while they salvaged their name. I chuckled, setting the paper down. "You actually think I'd sign this?" Lucas's expression didn't change. "You should. Because if you don't, things are going to get complicated." I stepped closer, meeting his gaze with a quiet, dangerous calm. "Things were already complicated the moment your brother lied to me. And let me make something very clear. This isn't about money. It's about principle." Lucas exhaled through his nose, his frustration barely concealed. "Then tell me what you want." I picked up the document, ripped it in half, and let the pieces flutter onto the desk. "I already have everything I want. For the first time, Lucas's mask of control cracked just slightly. He wasn't used to being denied. The Sterling family was accustomed to dictating the rules, and I had just rewritten them. He nodded slowly, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said, his tone carrying a subtle warning. I smiled. "I always do." He turned and walked toward the door, pausing only briefly before stepping out. "Be careful," he said over his shoulder. "My brother isn't the only one who plays dirty." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone once again. I stared at the shredded contract on the desk, my mind already racing through what was coming next. The Sterlings weren't going to let this go, but neither was I. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had memorized weeks ago. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Is it done?" I exhaled, gripping the edge of the desk. "Almost," I said. "But we need to move fast. They're already trying to push back." There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. "I told you they would. Do you have everything we need?" I glanced at my laptop, where an encrypted drive held the files I had gathered, the ones that went beyond simple business dealings. Adrian and his family weren't just power-hungry corporate titans. They had secrets, and I had spent the last few months collecting them. "I have more than enough," I said. "Then it's time," the voice replied. "Let's end this for good." I hung up, my pulse steady, my mind clear. The game wasn't over. Not yet. But when it was, there would be no doubt who the real winner was. I sat on the edge of the sleek, glass-topped desk, my fingers hovering over my laptop's keyboard. The room was dimly lit, the only glow coming from the screen displaying the countless documents, emails, and financial records I had compiled over the past few months. Every single piece of evidence pointed to a deep-rooted network of manipulation, backdoor deals, and hidden transactions that the Sterling family had worked tirelessly to conceal. And now I was about to set it all on fire. Lucas's warning still lingered in my mind. "Be careful. My brother isn't the only one who plays dirty." But the time for caution had passed. Adrian had tried to strip me of my dignity, my choices, and my future. Now it was his turn to feel powerless. I pulled out my phone and dialed a secure number. The voice on the other end answered almost immediately. "Is it time?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Release everything." There was a brief pause, then a low chuckle. "You got it. Consider it done." The moment the call ended, I exhaled. It had taken months of careful planning, endless nights of research, and patience beyond what I thought I was capable of. But now the dominoes had been set in motion. As I watched the files begin to upload to various media outlets, I knew Adrian and his family would soon wake up to a reality they had never prepared for. By morning, news channels would be flooded with reports of tax evasions, illegal investments, and confidential deals that would shake the very foundation of their empire. Just as I was about to close my laptop, my phone vibrated. It was Adrian. I let it ring. Once, twice. Then I picked up. "You have no idea what you've just done," he growled, his voice thick with barely contained fury. I leaned back, crossing my legs. "Oh, I think I do. You took everything from me the moment you turned our marriage into a business contract. I'm just returning the favor." His silence was sharp, cutting through the tension. Then, in a lower voice, he said, "You don't know the kind of people you're messing with." I arched an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean the ones who built their fortune by bending laws, threatening competitors, and controlling everything from behind the scenes? The ones who thought they could never be touched? Well, consider this a reality check, Adrian. Your family is not untouchable. Not anymore. You think this makes you safe?" he scoffed. "You think they'll let you walk away after this?" I smiled, knowing he couldn't see it, but feeling the victory settle deep in my chest. "You misunderstand. I'm not walking away, Adrian. I'm standing right in the middle of the storm, and I'm the one controlling it." Before he could respond, I ended the call. A soft knock at the door pulled me back to the present. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my silk robe before opening it. It was Lucas. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his expression unreadable. But something about the way his jaw tightened told me he already knew. "It's done," I said simply, shutting the door behind him. Lucas exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea what you've set into motion?" I folded my arms, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I know exactly what I've set into motion. And I know that your family thought they could manipulate me like every other business deal they've made. They were wrong." He studied me for a moment, his sharp eyes assessing every word, every movement. Then he let out a slow, amused breath. I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you. That was your first mistake, I said. Your second was assuming I would just sit back and let your brother destroy me. Lucas walked toward the window looking out at the ocean. You know, Adrian isn't the only one who had something to lose in this. You've just taken a wrecking ball to an empire that took decades to build. I shrugged. Maybe it was time someone did. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. And what's your endgame? What do you want? I leaned against the desk, tilting my head slightly. I already have what I want. Control. Justice. And the satisfaction of knowing that Adrian will never manipulate another woman the way he tried to manipulate me. Lucas let out a quiet laugh, running a hand through his hair. You really don't fear us, do you? I shook my head. No, Lucas. I don't fear people who rely on control to feel powerful. Because I don't need control. I just need the truth. And the truth is already out there. The phone on my desk buzzed again, this time with notifications from news outlets picking up the leaked files. The headlines were damning. Sterling family under investigation for financial misconduct. Corporate empire faces unprecedented crisis. Lucas glanced at my phone before meeting my gaze again. You've just started a war. I smiled, picking up the phone and scrolling through the news updates. No, Lucas. I've already won it. His eyes darkened for a moment, but then, unexpectedly, he smirked. You know, if you weren't my brother's biggest nightmare, I might actually like you. I chuckled, placing my phone back down. Lucky for me, I don't need your approval. Lucas nodded, stepping toward the door. You should watch your back, he said, pausing as he reached for the handle. Adrian may have lost control, but my father, he won't take this lightly. I nodded, fully aware of what was coming. Let him come, I said. I'll be ready. As Lucas disappeared into the night, I exhaled, turning back to my laptop. The chessboard had been cleared. The game was over. But the battle? That was only beginning. Lucas's footsteps faded into the night, and I stood motionless for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had just transpired. The war between me and the Sterling family was now out in the open, and there was no turning back. The headlines continued to pour in, exposing Adrian's business dealings, fraudulent contracts, and financial manipulations in real time. It was a spectacle I had orchestrated with precision, but now I had to be prepared for what came next. The retaliations wouldn't be subtle. They wouldn't be civil. The notification sound on my phone broke the silence, and when I glanced down at the screen, a name I had expected appeared, Adrian. This time it wasn't a call. It was a simple text. Meet me. The rooftop. No. I stared at the message, debating whether I should entertain whatever desperate attempt he was about to make. But I already knew my answer. Adrian wasn't the type to beg. If he had summoned me, it meant he believed he still had a card to play. And I needed to know exactly what that was. The rooftop of our honeymoon villa was secluded, with an infinity pool stretching toward the dark horizon. The ocean breeze was stronger up here, and the world below seemed smaller, more distant. Adrian stood near the edge, his silhouette rigid against the city lights in the background. His posture wasn't composed. No, he was on edge. And that was my first victory. You actually came, he muttered without turning around. I was curious, I admitted, stepping forward, though I kept my distance. I assume you didn't call me up here for small talk. He let out a slow breath, rolling his shoulders as if trying to shake off the weight of his downfall. You've made your point, all right? You won. His voice carried none of the arrogance it once did. I arched a brow. That almost sounds like an admission of defeat. He turned to face me then, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, they were different. They weren't filled with anger or hatred. They were calculating, searching for something. I underestimated you, he admitted, though it didn't sound like a compliment. More like an observation. But you don't understand what you've done. I crossed my arms, tilting my head. Enlighten me. He took a step closer and I didn't move. Do you really think my family will let this slide? You think taking down my company, humiliating me, was enough? His lips curled slightly, but it wasn't a smile. It was a warning. You've declared war on an empire and you don't even realize what that means. I met his gaze without flinching. You sound more worried about yourself than me, Adrian. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You don't get it. You've burned the bridges. You didn't just take my shares. You exposed the foundation of everything my family built. Now they'll do whatever it takes to rebuild. even if it means taking you down in the process. I took a slow step forward, watching him carefully. So what? You called me up here to threaten me? To try and intimidate me into walking away? His jaw tightened. No. I called you up here to warn you. That caught me off guard. A flicker of something genuine passed through his expression, but I refused to trust it. Adrian had played too many games for me to believe he was suddenly concerned for my well-being. You're warning me? I echoed. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. You think I'm the worst of them, but you haven't met my father. You haven't met the people behind the scenes who will do anything to clean up this mess. You think this was about me trying to take your family's business? Well, that was just the surface. He exhaled, looking out over the city. You put yourself in their path, and that's not a place you want to be. I studied him for a moment, measuring every word, every shift in his demeanor. Adrian had been my enemy, my betrayer, the man who saw me as a pawn in his grand scheme. And yet, for the first time, I saw something else. Something close to desperation. You're scared, I said finally. His head snapped toward me, his jaw tightening. I know what they're capable of. For the first time since this battle began, I hesitated. Not because I doubted my actions, but because I knew he was right. The Sterling family wasn't just powerful, they were relentless. And I had forced them into a corner. Adrian took another step closer, lowering his voice. We can fix this. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. Fix this? There's no fixing what you did, Adrian. His eyes darkened. Then at least be smart about it. You don't have to keep pushing. If you let it go now, you might still have a way out. I stared at him, letting the weight of his words settle. He wasn't trying to reclaim his power anymore. He was trying to mitigate his own downfall. But he had miscalculated again, because I had never been in this just to win. I was in this to make sure he and his family never had the chance to do this to anyone else. You don't understand, Adrian, I said softly, stepping even closer until I could see every flicker of uncertainty in his expression. I'm not looking for a way out. I'm making sure you don't have one. His breath caught for half a second, and in that moment I saw it. The realization that this wasn't just a power move for me. It was personal. It was final. A long silence stretched between us, the night air heavy with everything left unsaid. Then he let out a slow, resigned breath. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. I smiled, tilting my head. I always am. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving Adrian standing there with nothing but the weight of his shattered empire. The house of cards he had built had collapsed, and for the first time in his life he was the one left without control. As I descended the stairs, my phone buzzed again. This time the message was from an unknown number. You made a mistake. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat steady. No name. No details. Just a warning. But they didn't realize, this wasn't a mistake. This was the final play. And I wasn't done yet. I stared at the message glowing on my phone screen, its simplicity carrying an unmistakable weight. You made a mistake. No name, no sender. Just a warning, or perhaps a threat. But it was nothing I hadn't anticipated. The cool night air swirled around me as I stepped onto the villa's private balcony, my fingers tightening around the phone. Below, the ocean stretched endlessly into the darkness, waves crashing against the shore like a steady drumbeat. Somewhere out there, Adrian was still processing his downfall, still reeling from the consequences of his own arrogance. I had expected anger, denial, even desperate counterattacks. But what unsettled me wasn't Adrian's reaction. It was Lucas's parting words. You should watch your back. Adrian may have lost control, but my father, he won't take this lightly. I wasn't naive. The Sterling family had built an empire on dominance, on always being 3 steps ahead. They weren't just going to let me waltz in, dismantle their legacy, and walk away unscathed. The next move wasn't Adrian's anymore. It was his father's. I glanced back at the phone screen, debating whether to reply. Instead, I pressed the contact icon, sending the message to a secure backup folder. Whoever sent it had expected me to react emotionally, to let fear dictate my next steps. That wasn't going to happen. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, instincts sharp, heart steady. It was too soon for room service. I had told no one my plans. But I had learned long ago that power came with shadows, and sometimes those shadows knocked. I moved toward the door, my fingers grazing the cool handle before pulling it open. Lucas stood there, his expression unreadable, his posture just slightly too relaxed to be genuine. I crossed my arms. I thought we said our goodbyes. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. So did I. But then my father called. I shut the door, watching him carefully. And Lucas exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair before turning to face me fully. He's moving faster than I expected. He's furious. And when my father is furious, things don't end quietly. I smirked. Let me guess. He wants me to disappear. Lucas's lips pressed into a thin line. He wants this buried. If that means making you disappear, financially or otherwise, he won't hesitate. I leaned against the desk, tilting my head slightly. And you? Are you here to deliver the warning or the ultimatum? He sighed, shaking his head. I'm here because, whether I like it or not, you're smarter than I gave you credit for. And my father underestimates you even more than Adrian did. Which means this isn't going to go the way he expects. I studied him carefully, weighing the shift in his tone. Lucas wasn't like Adrian. He wasn't impulsive. He measured his words, chose his battles. Which meant he wasn't just here to intimidate me, he was here because he saw an opportunity. You're not just warning me, I said, watching his reaction closely. You're considering switching sides. A muscle in his jaw twitched, but he didn't deny it. I pushed off the desk, closing the distance between us. You know your family is sinking, don't you? Adrian was reckless, and now every financial institution, every major investor, is questioning whether the sterlings are worth the risk. Your father can throw his weight around, but the cracks are already there. Lucas met my gaze, his expression unreadable. What are you proposing? I smiled slowly. A shift in power. His silence stretched for several seconds before he let out a quiet laugh. You want to take down my father now, too? I shrugged. Not take down. Replace. The sterling name still has value, but only if it's restructured. If your father falls, someone will have to take control. Lucas exhaled, studying me with a mix of amusement and caution. And you think that should be you? I shook my head. I think that should be us. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Something calculating, something intrigued. Lucas had spent his life in Adrian's shadow, never quite stepping into the spotlight. But now, for the first time, he had a chance to be more than just the second son. If we do this, he said finally, his voice measured, there's no going back. I met his gaze without hesitation. There was never a way back to begin with. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. If I even entertain this, we need leverage. Something to push my father into a corner before he gets to you first. I turned back to my laptop, tapping the keyboard until a hidden folder appeared. I spun the screen toward him. I already have it. Lucas leaned in, scanning the documents, his brows furrowing as realization dawned. Where did you get this? I smirked. Adrian isn't the only one who left trails. His eyes darted across the screen, taking in the evidence of his father's offshore dealings, the hidden accounts, the partnerships that would collapse if exposed. Slowly he straightened, closing the laptop with a decisive click. You're playing a dangerous game. I stepped closer, my voice unwavering. I'm playing to win. Lucas exhaled, then after a long pause extended his hand. Then let's make sure we do. I took it, shaking firmly. The power shift had already begun. The Sterling family had built their empire on control, on fear, on the belief that they were untouchable. But now the rules had changed. As Lucas walked toward the door, he hesitated. My father won't see this coming. I smiled. That's what makes it fun. The door shut behind him and I turned back to my laptop, fingers poised above the keyboard. The endgame was near. But this time I wasn't just dismantling an empire. I was building one. The moment Lucas walked out the door, I let out a slow breath, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. The city stretched beneath me, glittering and alive, unaware of the power shift happening behind closed doors. The Sterling name had long commanded respect, fear, and an untouchable reputation. But by the time I was done, it would be nothing more than a reminder of how quickly power could slip through greedy fingers. I turned back to my laptop, tapping a few keys to bring up the live financial reports. As expected, the fallout had begun. Sterling International stock had taken another hit, the media frenzy was relentless, and Adrian had gone radio silent. For someone who had spent his life manipulating outcomes, silence meant only one thing. He was preparing for his next move. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the caller ID. I debated ignoring it, letting him stew in his own unraveling world. But something told me this wasn't another threat. This call had a different weight. I picked up. You really don't know when to quit, do you? My voice was smooth even. Adrian didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his tone lacked its usual arrogance. We need to talk. I smirked, leaning against the desk. That's what you said the last time, and all I got was another veiled threat. What's changed? A long pause. I blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me. You won, he admitted, his voice low, almost reluctant. I fought it, I denied it, but I see it now. You played the game better than I did. I narrowed my eyes. You expect me to believe you've suddenly developed self-awareness? You don't have to believe anything, he said. But I need to see you. One last time. Every instinct in me screamed no. Adrian was a strategist, a man who thrived on control. The idea that he would suddenly surrender? It didn't sit right. Why? I asked, not bothering to mask my suspicion. A sigh on the other end. Because before this all falls apart completely, I need to tell you something. Not as a businessman, not as the man who wronged you, but as someone who finally understands what he lost. I remained silent, weighing my options. If this was a trap, I was walking straight into it. But if there was something more to this, something I hadn't considered, I needed to know. Fine, I said. One meeting. Neutral ground. Agreed. He hesitated. The place where we first met. I let out a humorless laugh. Sentimental now, are we? I owe you that much. I didn't believe in his sincerity, but I did believe in closure. And if this was Adrian's last attempt to salvage his dignity, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The restaurant where we first met was quieter than I remembered. It was late, nearly empty, save for a few lingering guests and a bartender polishing glasses behind the counter. Adrian was already there, seated at a private table near the window. He looked different. Not the confident, untouchable mogul I had once known, but a man carrying the weight of his own downfall. I slid into the seat across from him, watching as he studied me. You look good, he said. I tilted my head. Flattery? That's your big final play? A small smile played at his lips. No. Just an observation. Silence settled between us, heavy and unspoken. Finally, he leaned forward, his fingers interlocking. You were right about everything. The manipulation, the deception. I did it all without a second thought because I believed I was untouchable. I saw you as a means to an end, and I didn't care what it cost you. I raised a brow. And now you do? I do. His jaw clenched. Because I lost something I never even realized I needed. I let out a quiet breath. And what exactly did you lose, Adrian? Your reputation? Your business? Your control? He shook his head. You. I blinked, caught off guard. Of all the things I had expected, that wasn't one of them. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I spent my life calculating every move, ensuring every deal was in my favor. But I didn't see the real cost until it was too late. You were the one person who saw through it all, who played the game better than I did, and instead of respecting that, I tried to own you. That was my greatest mistake. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Is this an apology or another attempt to manipulate me? His gaze was steady, raw. It's an apology. And an offer. I laughed, shaking my head. An offer? You have nothing left to bargain with. I have information. His voice was quiet but firm. About my father. About what happens next. I stilled. This was the moment. The reason I had agreed to meet. Go on. He won't stop, you know, Adrian continued. Lucas may have switched sides, but my father won't go down without a fight. He's already setting things in motion. Your assets, your investments, he's finding ways to freeze them, cut off your influence. He has allies you don't even know about yet. I exhaled slowly. And you're telling me this because? Because I want to see him fall as much as you do, Adrian admitted. You destroyed me, but I deserved it. My father? He's worse. And if you don't take him down completely, he'll regroup and come for you harder than before. I studied him, searching for any sign of deception. But for the first time I saw no lies. Just resignation. What's in it for you? I asked. He smiled, but it was different this time. Tired. Defeated. A fresh start. Maybe I don't deserve one, but I want to be free of all of this. If I give you what you need, I disappear. No more boardrooms, no more power plays. I tilted my head. And you expect me to trust you? No, he admitted. But I think you trust yourself enough to know when an opportunity presents itself. I tapped my fingers against the table, considering his words. Fine. Send me everything you have. If you're lying, I'll make sure there's nothing left of the Sterling name. His lips quirked. I'd expect nothing less. I stood, smoothing out my dress. Goodbye, Adrian. He didn't stop me. Didn't try to make a last plea. He simply watched as I walked away. As I stepped out into the night, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Check your inbox. It's all there. Make it count. Adrian had played his final card. Now it was my turn to end the game. The message from Adrian sat on my screen like a final offering, a quiet surrender wrapped in encrypted files. Check your inbox. It's all there. Make it count. I stared at it for a moment, absorbing the weight of what this meant. He had handed me the last piece of the puzzle, the evidence that would bury his father once and for all. I tapped the screen, opening the secured link he had sent. A torrent of documents, bank transactions, offshore accounts, and communication logs flooded my device. Every corrupt deal, every behind-the-scenes manipulation his father had orchestrated was laid out in meticulous detail. Adrian had truly given me everything. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I forwarded the files to my legal team, ensuring they had every necessary detail to dismantle the Sterling empire from the inside out. It would take a few hours for the news cycle to pick up the leaks, but once they did, there would be no escaping it. I exhaled, stepping away from my laptop. The city outside was still alive, unaware of the storm about to hit. My reflection in the window revealed the person I had become. Not the naive woman who had walked into a marriage built on lies, but the one who had rewritten the rules, taken control, and refused to be played. A sharp knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. My instincts flared, but I remained composed as I approached. When I opened it, Lucas stood there, his expression unreadable. It's done, I said before he could speak. He exhaled, stepping inside. So, Adrian really handed it all over? I nodded. Every last piece of evidence. His father won't recover from this. Lucas walked to the window, hands in his pockets. You just dismantled one of the most powerful corporate families in the world. And you did it without ever stepping into their boardroom. He turned to face me. That's impressive. I crossed my arms, my voice calm. You knew it was coming. The moment your father made me his enemy, there was no other outcome. Lucas studied me for a long moment before shaking his head with a quiet chuckle. I should have known you wouldn't settle for just taking Adrian down. I smirked. Why stop at one when the whole foundation was rotten? He sighed, but there was something almost approving in his gaze. So, what happens now? You've won. You've proven your point. I stepped closer, holding his gaze. Now. I walk away. Lucas frowned. That's it? You're just going to leave? I tilted my head slightly. What else is there? You've taken everything from them. You hold all the power now. You could rebuild the company under your own terms, reshape it into something better. I considered his words. The thought had crossed my mind. After all, I had the controlling stake, the influence, the leverage to turn the Sterling name into something unrecognizable. But that wasn't why I had done this. I exhaled. I didn't do this to run their empire, Lucas. I did this so they couldn't use it to destroy people like me ever again. He studied me, something unreadable passing through his expression. So that's it. You win and walk away? I gave a slow nod. Yes. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, letting out a quiet chuckle. You're the most dangerous person I've ever met. I smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. His phone buzzed, pulling him from the moment. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. It started. The media's picking up the leaks. My father's already issuing statements trying to contain the damage. I leaned against the desk, crossing my arms. Let him try. By tomorrow the investors will abandon him. The board will have no choice but to force him out. Lucas exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He's going to come after you. I met his gaze without hesitation. Let him. I'll be waiting. A long silence stretched between us before Lucas finally nodded. You really are something else. I shrugged. I told you I don't lose. He let out a breath before turning toward the door. If you ever decide to take over the corporate world instead of burning it down, give me a call. I chuckled. I'll think about it. Lucas hesitated for half a second, then shook his head with a smirk before disappearing into the night. The moment the door clicked shut, I turned back to my laptop, watching the headlines shift in real time. Sterling Empire collapses under legal scrutiny. Former CEO under investigation for financial manipulations. Board members call for restructuring. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. It was over. The war had been fought, the pieces had been played, and in the end I had rewritten the ending on my own terms. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the flood of messages from journalists, legal advisors and business insiders. They all wanted statements, interviews, reactions. I ignored them all. Instead, I tapped a single number, one that had been waiting for this moment. When the voice on the other end picked up, I smiled. Book the flight. I'm leaving tonight. The voice on the other end chuckled. Done. Where to? I looked out at the city one last time, taking in the world I had conquered. Somewhere new, I said. Somewhere where no one knows my name. The call ended, and with it the last chapter of this story. I had won. I had everything. And now it was time to disappear.